The headlights cut through the pitch-black highway as Sarah gripped the steering wheel tightly. Her knuckles were white, her breath shallow. She wasn't alone in the car, she could feel it. But when she glanced at the rearview mirror, all she saw was the empty backseat dot, and then came the whisper, "Don't look again." Her heart slammed against her chest, but before she could scream, the voice added softly, almost kindly, "It's safer if you don't know who I am." Sarah had been driving for hours, trying to escape the chaos of her life, a messy divorce, mounting debts, and a haunting sense of failure. The road ahead was desolate, flanked by dense woods that seemed alive under the moonlight. She told herself it was just fatigue playing tricks on her mind. After all, how could someone be in her car without her noticing? But the whispers persisted, growing louder each time she tried to ignore them. They weren't coming from inside the car, they were inside her head. She pulled over abruptly, parking on the shoulder of the road. Her hands trembled as she turned off the engine and sat in silence, listening. Nothing. Just the faint rustle of leaves outside. Relief washed over her until she noticed something odd. In the rearview mirror, there was now a faint outline of a figure sitting directly behind her. It wasn't reflected in the glass itself. It was floating like a shadow cast from nowhere. "What do you want?" Sarah whispered hoarsely too, afraid to turn around. The response sent chills down her spine. "To finish what you started." As Sarah drove again, this time faster, panicked, the memories flooded back unbidden. 3 years ago, she'd hit someone on this very stretch of road late one night. A hitchhiker, drenched in rain, standing in the middle of the highway. She hadn't meant to kill him, it was an accident, but instead of stopping, she sped away, leaving no trace behind. No one ever found the body. No charges were filed. Life moved on. Or so she thought. Now, as the whispers grew louder and the shadow in the mirror began moving closer, Sarah realized the truth. Whoever or whatever was haunting her wasn't done yet. Desperate to shake the presence, Sarah stopped at a gas station miles away. She called her best friend, Mia, sobbing uncontrollably. "I think I'm losing my mind," she confessed. "There's someone in my car, or maybe in my head." Mia stayed calm, offering reassurance. "Listen, I'll meet you halfway. Stay put until I get there." Grateful for the support, Sarah waited. When Mia arrived an hour later, she hugged Sarah tightly. "You're safe now," Mia said gently. But as they walked back to the car together, Sarah froze. Sitting in the driver's seat was the same shadowy figure from the mirror. And worst of all, it looked exactly like Mia. Before Sarah could react, Mia grabbed her arm firmly. "Get in the car," she said, her voice cold and unfamiliar. "Who are you?" Sarah stammered, backing away. Mia smiled a cruel, twisted grin and replied, "I'm here to make sure you face justice, one way or another." Sarah stumbled backward, her eyes locked on Mia, or rather, the thing that looked like Mia. Her best friend's face was eerily calm, but her voice carried a chilling edge. "You can't run anymore," Mia said softly, tilting her head. "He's waiting for you." "Who?" Sarah choked out, her voice barely above a whisper. Mia didn't answer. Instead, she stepped aside, revealing the shadowy figure still sitting in the driver's seat. Its hollow eyes gleamed faintly under the dim gas station lights. And then it spoke, not with words, but directly into Sarah's mind. "You left me here to rot." Panic surged through Sarah as memories crashed over her like waves. She remembered the night 3 years ago, the hitchhiker, the impact, the blood smeared across her windshield. But something about this moment felt wrong. "Wait," Sarah stammered, backing away. "I hit him. I saw him fall. He was human." Mia's expression hardened. "That's where you're wrong." Before Sarah could ask what she meant, the world around her shifted. The gas station vanished, replaced by an endless stretch of highway cloaked in darkness. The air grew colder, heavier, as if the night itself had turned against her. She spun around, searching for Mia or anyone, but there was no one. Just the sound of tires screeching behind her. When she turned, her car was barreling toward her. At full speed, headlights blinding. Behind the wheel sat the shadowy figure, its grin wide and unnatural dot as the car skidded to a halt inches from her. Sarah collapsed to her knees, sobbing. The figure stepped out, not as a man, but as a swirling, massive smoke and shadows. It loomed over her, its presence suffocating. "I'm not who you think I am," it rasped, its voice echoing inside her skull. Flashes of memory assaulted her again, fragments she'd buried deep. The hitchhiker hadn't been alone that night. There had been someone else in the woods, watching. Someone who had promised to help her cover up the accident. It was Mia. Sarah's breath hitched as realization dawned. You were there, all this time?" Mia reappeared beside the shadow, her demeanor icy. "You thought I was your friend?" "No, Sarah, I've been waiting for this moment, for him to come back." The shadow gestured toward Mia, and suddenly, Sarah understood the horrifying truth. The hitchhiker wasn't human. Whatever he was, Mia had made a deal with him to protect herself. Not Sarah. Just as Sarah processed this revelation, the shadow lunged at her, pinning her to the ground. Its form shifted, revealing glimpses of the hitchhiker's face, but distorted, monstrous. "You killed me," it hissed. "But you're not the only one who owes me." Mia stepped forward, her hands trembling. "Let her go. She's yours now, just leave me out of it." The shadow paused, turning its gaze to Mia. For a moment, silence hung heavy between them. Then, with a flick of its wrist, the shadow released Sarah and grabbed Mia instead. "No!" Mia screamed, struggling futilely as the shadow dragged her into the car. Sarah watched in stunned silence as the vehicle roared to life and sped off into the void, leaving her stranded on the empty highway. Hours passed, or maybe days. Sarah couldn't tell. When she finally stumbled onto another road, she flagged down a passing trucker named Jake. He seemed kind enough, offering her a ride to the nearest town. But as they drove, Sarah noticed something strange. Jake kept glancing at her in the rearview mirror, his expression uneasy. "You okay, miss?" he asked after a long silence. She nodded weakly, too exhausted to explain. Then Jake muttered under his breath, "Third one tonight." Sarah froze. "What did you say?" Jake hesitated, then sighed. "Look, I don't know what happened to you, but you're not the first person I've picked up on this road tonight, and none of them have made it to the next town." Her stomach churned. "What do you mean?" Before he could answer, the radio crackled to life, playing static-filled whispers. "They're coming for you." Jake slammed on the brakes as headlights appeared behind them, a line of cars stretching endlessly into the distance. Each vehicle contained passengers whose faces were obscured by shadows. Jake gripped the wheel tightly, his voice shaking. "We need to get off this road, now." As Jake swerved onto a narrow dirt path, Sarah glanced back at the convoy of cars trailing them. One by one, their headlights blinked out until only darkness remained. Then, from the shadows came the unmistakable sound of footsteps crunching gravel. "They're walking," Jake whispered, panic rising in his voice. Sarah twisted around, her heart pounding. Through the rear window, she saw silhouettes emerging from the void, dozens of them, closing in fast. And leading them all was the shadowy figure from before, dragging Mia's lifeless body behind him. Jake floored the accelerator as the footsteps grew louder behind them. The headlights of their pursuers blinked back to life one by one, illuminating the dark forest like glowing eyes. "They're catching up," Sarah screamed, clutching the dashboard. "Shut up and hold on." Jake snapped, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. But no matter how fast he drove, the convoy stayed close, always just a few car lengths behind. They weren't alone anymore. Shadowy figures began appearing alongside the dirt path, walking in sync with the vehicles. Their faces were obscured, but their intentions were clear. They wanted Sarah. As Jake swerved sharply around a bend, the radio crackled again, this time louder. "You can't escape us, not tonight." Sarah turned to Jake, her voice trembling. "Who are they? What do they want?" Jake hesitated, then muttered under his breath, "They're not after you, they're after me." The truck skidded to a stop at the edge of a cliff. Beyond it lay nothing but darkness, an abyss that seemed to stretch forever. Jake cursed loudly, slamming his fist against the wheel. "There's nowhere left to run," he said, his voice hollow. Sarah stared at him, wide-eyed. "What did you do?" For a moment, Jake didn't answer. He just sat there, staring out at the endless void. Then, slowly, he began to speak, not to Sarah, but to himself, as if reliving memories too painful to bury any longer. "It was supposed to be an easy job," he whispered. "Just a quick delivery, no questions asked." 5 years ago, Jake had been a struggling truck driver desperate for cash. One night, he accepted a high-paying gig transporting cargo across state lines. The client gave him strict instructions. Don't open the crates, don't stop for anyone, and take the old highway, the one locals called the Forgotten Road. At first, everything went smoothly. But halfway through the trip, Jake heard noises coming from inside the trailer, muffled cries, scratching. Something or someone was alive back there. Curiosity got the better of him. He pulled over and cracked open one of the crates. Inside, bound and gagged, was a young woman. Her terrified eyes pleaded with him to help her. Before Jake could decide what to do, headlights appeared in the distance. A black SUV screeched to a halt beside him, and men in suits stepped out. They didn't ask questions, they acted. When Jake woke up hours later, the woman was gone, and so was the cargo. The men had warned him never to speak of what he'd seen, or else they would come for him. As Jake finished recounting his story, the convoy finally surrounded them. Dozens of cars formed a tight circle, trapping the truck at the edge of the cliff. One vehicle, a sleek black sedan, pulled forward. Its door opened, and a familiar figure stepped out. It was the woman from the crate, but she wasn't human anymore. Her skin was pale, almost translucent, and her eyes glowed faintly in the moonlight. She walked toward the truck, her movements unnervingly smooth. "You abandoned me," she said, her voice echoing like whispers in the wind. "You let them take me back." Jake's face crumpled in guilt. "I'm sorry. I didn't know what else to do." The woman stopped inches from the truck, raising a hand. Behind her, the shadowy figures closed in, forming a wall of darkness. "This is your punishment," she whispered. And hers. Before either Jake or Sarah could react, the ground beneath the truck began to crumble. With a deafening roar, the vehicle plunged over the edge of the cliff, but instead of falling into oblivion, they landed on a narrow road bathed in an eerie green light. Trees loomed overhead, their branches twisting like skeletal fingers. The air smelled of earth and decay. Jake groaned, blood trickling down his forehead. Where are we?" Sarah unbuckled her seatbelt, shaking uncontrollably. "We're not dead, are we?" A low rumble answered her question. From the horizon came another vehicle, a hearse, its windows tinted black. It moved silently, without headlights, until it stopped directly in front of them. The rear door creaked open, revealing a coffin draped in white silk. Inside lay a note addressed to Sarah. She hesitated, then reached for it. The handwriting was jagged, frantic. "If you're reading this, it means I failed. Don't trust anyone, not even yourself." Before Sarah could process the message, the coffin lid slammed shut on its own. The hearse's engine roared to life, and it sped off. Into the distance, Jake grabbed Sarah's arm. "We need to follow it." "Are you insane?" she cried. "That thing isn't normal. It's our only way out of here," he shot back. "Unless you want to stay and find out what happens when those shadows catch up." As if on cue, the trees around them began to whisper. Come closer." Against her better judgment, Sarah climbed back into the truck. Jake started the engine, and they raced after the hearse, deeper into the haunted woods. Behind them, the convoy reappeared, their headlights blazing brighter than ever. The hearse sped through the haunted forest like a ghostly apparition, its black frame gliding effortlessly over the uneven road. Jake pushed the truck to its limits, but no matter how fast they drove, the distance between them and the hearse never seemed to shrink. Sarah clutched the cryptic note in her trembling hands, rereading the jagged handwriting over and over. "If you're reading this, it means I failed. Don't trust anyone, not even yourself." "What does that mean?" she whispered, more to herself than to Jake. Jake didn't answer. His eyes were locked on the road ahead, his jaw clenched tightly. But something about his silence felt off. As if sensing her gaze, he glanced at her briefly. "We need to focus," he said curtly. "Not everything has an explanation right now." But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that he was hiding something. The forest grew denser, the trees forming a suffocating canopy above them. The green light that had illuminated the road earlier began to fade, replaced by an oppressive darkness. Even the truck's headlights struggled to pierce the gloom. Suddenly, the hearse vanished. One moment it was there, leading them deeper into the woods, and the next it was gone, as if swallowed by the shadows. Jake slammed on the brakes, bringing the truck to a screeching halt. "Where did it go?" he muttered, scanning the surroundings. Before Sarah could respond, a faint sound reached their ears, a low, rhythmic tapping. It came from behind them. Slowly, they turned around. In the bed of the truck sat the coffin, its lid slightly ajar. The tapping was coming from inside. Sarah froze, her heart pounding. "What? How did that get here?" Jake didn't answer. Instead, he climbed out of the truck and approached the coffin cautiously. His movements were stiff, mechanical, as if he were being compelled rather than acting of his own free will. "Jake, stop!" Sarah shouted, but he ignored her. When he reached the coffin, he paused, staring at it with an unreadable expression. Then, without warning, he flipped open the lid. Inside lay a man, or what was left of him. His face was pale, his body emaciated, as if he'd been drained of life. But his eyes, they were wide open, filled with terror. And then he spoke. "They're using you," he rasped, his voice barely audible. "Both of you, you're pawns in their game. Who's using us?" Sarah demanded, stepping closer despite her fear. The man didn't answer. Instead, he grabbed Jake's arm with surprising strength. "You know what you did," he hissed. "You can't run from it anymore." Jake recoiled, stumbling backward. For the first time, Sarah saw genuine fear in his eyes. "What is he talking about?" she asked, her voice rising. Jake hesitated, then sighed heavily. "I didn't just abandon that woman in the crate," he admitted. I helped them catch her. They paid me to betray her." The man in the coffin let out a hollow laugh. "And now they've come for you too." Before Sarah could process Jake's confession, the man in the coffin began to convulse violently. His body twisted unnaturally, bones cracking and skin tearing as he transformed into something monstrous. "No," Jake whispered, backing away. The creature lunged at him, pinning him to the ground. Its voice echoed inside Sarah's mind. "Your sins have marked you. There is no escape." Sarah screamed, turning to flee, but the shadows closed in around her, cutting off any chance of escape. Then, from the darkness, a familiar figure emerged. It was Mia, or at least what remained of her. Her once kind face was now gaunt and hollow, her eyes glowing with malevolent energy. "You shouldn't have trusted him," Mia said, gesturing toward Jake. The creature released Jake and turned its gaze to Sarah. She felt a cold hand grip her shoulder, pulling her back toward the coffin. "No," she cried, struggling against the unseen force. Mia smiled cruelly. "It's your turn now." As Sarah was dragged toward the coffin, flashes of memory assaulted her, fragments of her past she'd tried so hard to forget. The hitchhiker, the accident, the guilt. It all came rushing back, but this time, something was different. Amidst the chaos, she realized the truth. None of this was about revenge. It wasn't about punishing her for killing the hitchhiker or betraying him. It was about balance. The hitchhiker hadn't been human, he'd been a guardian of sorts, tasked with maintaining order on the forgotten road. By interfering, both Sarah and Jake had disrupted that balance, unleashing chaos upon themselves and others. And now, they would pay the price. As Sarah was forced into the coffin, she caught one last glimpse of Jake. He was kneeling on the ground, tears streaming down his face as the shadows consumed him. The lid slammed shut, plunging her into darkness. There was silence. Then, a soft voice whispered inside her mind, "Welcome to eternity." When the coffin opened again, Sarah found herself standing on the forgotten road. But this time, she wasn't alone. Beside her stood Jake, Mia, and countless others, their faces blank, their eyes glowing faintly. Ahead of them, the convoy of shadows waited, their headlights casting an eerie glow. And leading them all was the hitchhiker, his form shifting between human and monstrous. "Let's finish what we started," he said, his voice echoing in the void. Sarah stood motionless on the forgotten road, her body no longer her own. She could feel the weight of countless eyes upon her, shadowy figures lining the convoy behind her, their faces blank but their intentions clear. Ahead of them loomed the hitchhiker, his form shifting between human and monstrous. His hollow gaze locked onto Sarah as he extended a hand toward her. "Come," he said softly, his voice reverberating through the void. "It's time to end this." Jake stepped forward hesitantly, his face pale with fear. "What happens now?" The hitchhiker didn't answer. Instead, he turned and began walking down the endless highway, the convoy following silently in his wake. Sarah felt an invisible force pulling her along, forcing her to join the procession. Each step filled her with dread, yet she couldn't resist. The road stretched infinitely before them, bathed in an eerie green glow that seemed to pulse with every heartbeat. As they walked, Sarah noticed something strange. The shadows around them weren't just watching, they were whispering. Fragments of conversations drifted through the air, each one more haunting than the last. "I didn't mean to. Why did you leave me? You promised." The voices grew louder, overlapping, until they became a deafening chorus. Sarah clutched her head, trying to block them out, but they seeped into her mind like poison. "What are they saying?" she asked, her voice trembling. The hitchhiker glanced back at her, his expression unreadable. "They're speaking your truth," he replied. "Every lie, every betrayal, every choice you've ever made, it's all here." Jake stumbled beside her, tears streaming down his face. "I never wanted this," he whispered. "None of us do," Mia interjected coldly. Her once familiar voice was now devoid of emotion, a mere echo of who she used to be. "But choices have consequences." Sarah looked around at the others, their lifeless eyes, their mechanical movements, and realized the horrifying truth. They weren't just prisoners of the forgotten road, they were the road itself. The procession came to a halt at a massive gate carved into the horizon. Its surface shimmered like liquid metal, reflecting distorted images of those who stood before it. The hitchhiker approached the gate and placed his hand against its surface. Instantly, visions flooded Sarah's mind, flashes of other lives, other roads, other mistakes. She saw herself as a child, hiding under the covers while her parents argued downstairs. She saw herself as a teenager, lying to her best friend about where she'd been. She saw herself as an adult, making deals she couldn't keep, betraying those she loved most. And then she saw the hitcher, not as a monster, but as a man. A man who had once been kind, compassionate, even heroic. But somewhere along the way, he too had made choices that cost him everything. "This is what we are," he said, his voice heavy with sorrow. Guardians of balance, punishers of chaos. We take those who disrupt the natural order and bind them to this place for eternity. Before Sarah could process his words, the gate opened, revealing a blinding light. From within emerged another figure, a woman cloaked in white, her presence radiating warmth and calm. "You don't belong here," she said gently, addressing Sarah. The hitchhiker stiffened. "What do you mean?" She disrupted the balance. "She must stay." The woman shook her head. "Her journey isn't over yet. She still has a chance to make things right." Sarah stared at her, confused. "What are you talking about?" "I'm already gone." The woman smiled softly. "Not entirely. You're caught between worlds, suspended in limbo. If you can confront your deepest fears and regrets, you may find redemption. But if you fail," she gestured toward the gate, "this will become your prison forever." The scene shifted abruptly. Sarah found herself standing in her childhood home, surrounded by memories she'd long buried. Her parents' voices echoed through the walls, arguing about money, responsibility, and love. A younger version of herself sat on the stairs, hugging her knees tightly. "Help me," the child whispered, looking up at Sarah with tear-filled eyes. Sarah hesitated, overwhelmed by guilt and grief. "I don't know how." "You do," the woman in white said, appearing beside her. "Face what you've been running from. Only then can you move forward." Summoning every ounce of courage, Sarah knelt beside her younger self and wrapped her arms around her. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to cry, to truly feel the pain she'd spent a lifetime suppressing. When she opened her eyes, the house was gone. She stood alone on the forgotten road, the hitchhiker watching her intently. "You've earned your freedom," he said gruffly. "But remember, balance must be maintained. Don't let this happen again." With a wave of his hand, the world dissolved into light. Sarah woke up in her car, parked on the side of a familiar highway. The clock on the dashboard read 2 a.m., the exact time when her nightmare had begun. For a moment, she thought it had all been a dream. But then she noticed something on the passenger seat, the note from the coffin. "If you're reading this, it means I failed. Don't trust anyone, not even yourself." Tears welled up in her eyes as she realized the truth. The forgotten road wasn't just a place, it was a state of mind. A reminder of the consequences of our actions, the weight of our choices. She crumpled the note and threw it out the window, vowing to live differently from that moment on. As she drove away, the radio crackled to life, playing a song she hadn't heard in years. The lyrics spoke of forgiveness, redemption, and second chances, and for the first time in a long time, Sarah smiled. The end.